This movie tells a story about Art the Clown, who is set to unleash chaos on the unsuspecting residents of Miles County as they peacefully drift off to sleep on Christmas Eve. This third movie attempts to take the series to bigger heights in storytelling as well as gore. While there are sporadically satisfying moments, the experience is shockingly boring. With each entry, this franchise has become increasingly focused on its story. Unfortunately, this is the weakest aspect of this movie. With the deeper character development, the movie also attempts to add thematic depth to it, which doesn't work at all. The movie's attempt to expand the film's story makes things overcomplicated and dull. This entry covers very familiar thematic ground in its exploration of trauma, following in the footsteps of any number of slasher sequels, particularly the Halloween franchise. The movie also attempts to expand the mythos of Art the Clown, and the results are incredibly confusing. In its attempt to explain the character as more than a relentless killing machine, the movie destroys some of the mystery that made the character so intriguing. This film also introduces a secondary antagonist in a strange decision that feels crassly consumerist. This movie beats stay relatively the same. Art the Clown massacres in truly despicable and disgusting ways, which is balanced by a dull and still story of normal people who will eventually have to deal with the wrath of Art. Art the Clown is not alone now, and that's too bad because he's more fun on his own. Having said that, when it's about watching limbs being torn off a screaming human's body, the carnage does get tiresome after a while. This third installment has a little bit more plot than the first and second films, but not enough to justify its lengthy running time. Like with Terrifier 2, the film eventually gets tedious around the hour mark. The movie expands the lore within this series through some very blunt exposition and heavy-handed imagery. The movie pushes the lore behind Art and Sienna not for any satisfying conclusion to this film, but more for the sake of future releases. The movie continues to give us tidbits about Art and his history and goals, but the more we get to know Art, the less we really learn about him, as Art's rationale and the entire Terrifier franchise mythos seem random and unformed. Sienna gets little to do until the third act. Instead of growing into her role as Art's nemesis, she's struggling with her mental health. Kid brother Jonathan gets even less to explore. Meanwhile, Art goes through his motions, pinging from one set piece to another with no rhyme or reason. Art is decent, and his clownish tics never fail, but they're at the service of a story that gives him little to do but grind through his greatest hits. The performance in general is obviously mediocre, and the plot doesn't really work. The film's editing is rudimentary, simply cutting back and forth from Art's exploits to Sienna's reintegration into family, which can be jarring. This movie feels like very little is happening when no one is dying. Instead, we get cliché Christmas scenes and ridiculous flashbacks. The movie's half-baked supernatural aspect comes into play as well, depressingly setting up another sequel. The obvious effort in the production is with makeup and effects. The craftsmanship and detail committed to the gory violence here is rather good. If only the filmmakers had taken a fraction of the time to flesh out their character and a story into more than just people going from place to place and being pursued by a creative maniac. Overall, it's not worth to watch this in theaters, just wait on your streaming service.